Good morning, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Let's get started this morning with Johnny Little Tune 1036, Calypso Alleluia. I invite you to rise in all the ways that we do as we sing together. Thank you. You may be seated. So happy Easter and Passover blessings to one and all. We welcome you whether you're here live on campus or on live stream. We hope that you will find this to be a meaningful and celebratory service today. We especially do welcome our visitors. If you are here on campus, we hope that you'll take a moment before you leave to go to the Welcome Center so that we can give you an official welcome and tell you more about the congregation. You can also sign up for our newsletter there, and we will send you the contact every week. It is also true that if you're online, you can go to our virtual Welcome Center by clicking on the banner on the homepage that says Welcome Visitors. That will also take you to a place where you can find out more about who we are, and also we have a virtual guest book there. If you sign it, we'll send you our newsletter and also some of the links for our various meetings. We hope that you will be able to join us when you're able. We also remind you that there is, after the service, a coffee hour here on campus, and especially remind you to look for name tags with a red border on them. These are our first-time visitors, so make a special effort to help them feel welcome as they have come here for the first time. I know you'll reach out to them very warmly. So we have a few announcements to go over. The UUCS Arts Council is proud to present the Spring 2022 Member Art Exhibit in the Lexal Wing Gallery. That's right across the courtyard. Please join them for the opening reception from 10 to 1 p.m. today in the gallery. They are pleased to share 34 works from 23 member artists. The Arts Council thanks these artists for their contribution. They hope that you will take a moment to enjoy their work, and the exhibit will be up through June 16th. And we had a wonderful event last week that we would like to tell you just a little bit about how it came together and say some thank you. So I would like to invite the main folks from our auction committee to come up. Welcome, welcome.
Good morning. Terry Holsinger, who I'm going to introduce again in just a minute. Are we on now? Good. Thank you for letting me know. Terry Holsinger is here with me today. I'll mention her again in a minute. Some members of the auction team are going to filter up and have a seat for just a minute. We're going to do, Terry referred to this as the Academy Awards event of the auction. So we're going to go through a few things that you need to know, a few business items. As I always do, I drag you through business. Just very quickly, today out by the Reeb Room is where you can pick up any tangibles that you haven't already picked up. And you can also pay for any invoice that you have. If you have any problem with the invoice, that's also a good place to let us know, and we'll try to resolve it as quickly as possible. A thank you to all of you who have been paying by credit card. We have already collected about 70% of the proceeds of the auction, and this has been the easiest post-week of the auction that we've ever had. If you haven't received your invoice yet, please let us know. Look for it in your inbox or your junk folder, and if you still haven't received it, I think you have our email. You've seen a lot of me over the past several months. The auction team has been doing a great deal of work, and before I start thanking some of the team members, I want to thank someone who's in the audience today who's special to me, and that is Mike Troutman, who very often said, "What you doing?" And the answer was always, "Auction." So thank you, Mike. You haven't seen Terry, because Terry had a knee replacement, and despite a knee replacement, surgery, PT, and pain, maybe a few pain pills, Terry has been there every day and throughout the entire auction, as she always has been. She's been a best friend and a best colleague. Together, we're going to tell you about the outcomes, but Terry, thank you. You're welcome.
I want to thank my mom and dad. So this community is the finest I've ever been a part of. The spirit, the camaraderie, the caring, the helpfulness, and yes, even the competitive bidding. Let me get this out of the way here. Has made that delightful, this auction just delightful. It's just, as Karen said, it's just so much easier. Software makes all the difference. Thank you, each of you, for what you brought to the auction. And would you like to know what we've raised to support our church? It's in excess of, it's a little over $25,000. And that's stupendous. That's almost 3 times what we expected originally. So that you all have been amazing. And on top of that, we raised funds for the Unitarian Universalist Social Committee, Emergency Relief Fund for the Ukrainians. I cannot believe how much money we raised in what, an hour? 1 hour? And there's some funds that are dribbling in too, so we could possibly hit $5,000. I don't know. But anyway, a check for this amount will be going to the UUSC within a month. There's a cycle that we have to go through. And let's take a few moments to thank the core auction team for their work. We could not, Karen and I co-chaired it, but we could not have done it without them. And Karen, you want to start? As they're coming to the platform, I also want to thank several of our staff members. Certainly Doug for his enthusiastic support, Dee for staying on top of every detail and fielding calls to the office, Roberta for the managing of the finances and supporting the licensing of our software platform, Auctria, A-U-C-T-R-I-A is the company name, and Catherine for all the work she did in moving tables and helping to clean up after the auction events. This team, oh my. They solicited and helped you formulate your donations. They provided publicity in our website where you could find out information. They created the library, the online and hard copy, created and managed tickets, set up and cleaned up the decorations, and man, was that luncheon fantastic. Provided the food and wine, created graphics and signs, trained and supported the room captains and table hosts, and more. So, Karen, you ready? Yolanda Stevens. Let's see. And we have the cows coming forward.
Here they come.
You also David every week out there, and Mary Jane. Do we have Do we have any more of our team out here?
No. Some of our team members prefer to stay behind the scenes, and some of them, I think, maybe decided to take a vacation today. Okay, Bill, you wanted to say something?
Well, since you asked me to, yes.
This is spontaneous, Bill.
This is spontaneous. So I was on I-75 the other day, and I was thinking about what could I possibly say to thank these people. And then I lost my train of thought because traffic started slowing down, and pretty soon it was bumper to bumper and stop and go. And then I saw a sign that said there was a lane closure. And then, of course, there's a merge sign. And I thought, this is brilliant, because this is God's way of making us interact with each other. So it was perfect, because you've got social distancing, so they don't need to wear a mask, and you could see how delighted the people were to go through this event. And as you got closer to the merging point, people were really excited, and they were waving at each other. And it gave me a chance to practice a couple of our principles, and so I finally let somebody in front of me, and they didn't wave. And that's the rule, really. If you let someone in, they have to wave, but I got over it, and I waved at them anyway. And I thought, this is fantastic. And then I thought, no, this isn't fantastic. What is fantastic is this group up here. And if you want to talk about interaction, we had lots of interaction last week. More importantly, we had a lot of transactions last week. And so we have this group to thank. We have all of you to thank. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful job. So let's have a great round of applause for this group.
Go ahead.
There are more people to thank, and if there's anyone here, would you please stand up that worked on setup, table hosts, room captains, food service, and others? Please stand up and let people acknowledge how many of our, look at this. And then, who donated items? Please stand up. I want to see who donated. Look at this. It is all of you who made this a huge success, between the donors, the bidders, the workers, the whole team. Thank you, and enjoy the fun that you'll have from your winnings, and we will see you next February.
Right. Thank you.
And now, the beautiful music of Don Bryn will transition us into our time of worship. which officially begins our service. And if you are at home, I hope you'll either light a candle, or if you have a chalice at home, light it along with us. Let us wake up, not just from Sunday morning exhaustion, from the wish to spend a few more minutes in bed. Let us wake up to this world we live in, to its beauty and wonder, also to its tragedy and pain. We must wake up to this reality, that not all in our world have what we do, however much or little that is. We must wake up to the idea that our wholeness, our lives, are only as complete as the lives of those around us, of those who we are inextricably tied to in the great web of mutuality, of which all of us are a part. We must #stay woke as our friends and colleagues involved in Black Lives Matter, working every day for racial justice in our country. As we light our chalice, let us wake up. Let us stay awake. Let us stay woke. And now, in this time and place together, let us worship. For all ages.
So, can you hear me? Not yet. There we go. So, I'm going to tell you an Easter story, and I brought my own prop, so excuse me while I get that ready. It's not the traditional Easter story that many of you grew up with about the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. But it is a story that makes just as much sense to me, and perhaps even more. So, I need an assistant to help me, and we're going to find that spot, to come help me tell the story. So Nora, if you will come up here, I appreciate that. Okay, so Nora, come stand right here. You're good, you're good. Okay, I got a question for you. Do you know what day we celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ?
April 17th.
No, that's today. The day that Jesus Christ was born. There's lots of presents. There's a little baby in a manger.
Easter.
You get lots of presents. It's cold outside. There's a manger with a star. Christmas. All right, we got it. Christmas. Okay. Do you know what most Christians recognize on Good Friday? This one's even tougher. Do you have any idea? It's okay if you don't know. Most Christians, of course, recognize the death of Jesus Christ and him being entombed. Okay. Do you know what most Christians recognize on Easter? No, that's okay. That's all right. So most Christians recognize on Easter the resurrection, or the fact that when they went back to the tomb to check on Jesus, his body was gone. So, but nobody really knows for sure exactly what that was. So, you know, for most Christians, Christmas, the time of Lent up to Good Friday, and Easter are like our holy days. And so most Christians believe that Christ was sent to us as a human Savior, and he was a divine Savior. And since Jesus died, most Christians believe that Jesus was sent here to take our punishment for all the things that we did to get in trouble with God and his laws. Therefore, he liberated all Christians from having to have any punishment from God. Now, Unitarians and Universalists are not on the same page as most Christians. When our two faiths were founded in America, it was during the Enlightenment, or the Age of Reason. So, our founders used science and reason to look at the origins of the Bible and the stories in the Bible, and they said, nope, I can't believe that a loving God would say, only some people are worth saving, and the rest of you get nothing but terrible punishment for the rest of your lives. So we said, no, we don't believe in that. It seemed more reasonable that people would, have to face, when they went to heaven, a limited form of punishment. Kind of like when your parents send you to your room and say, think about what you did. This was the way that we thought we could get back into better standing with God. So you consider, don't fall off, Jesus a worthy teacher to be imitated, but we don't consider him divine as most Christians use that word. So our Easter story could go something like this. So are you ready? Nope? Okay, that's good. Perfect. All right, I need you to sit down cross-legged right there and be still. But look at the audience. They don't want to see the top of your head. All right, we ready? You good? No? All right, well, here we go anyway. So, long before Jesus was born, the Jewish people had established a way of life. This life, in many ways, was very rigid. There were rules on what you should wear. There were rules on what you could eat and how you could eat. There were rules on how you could worship God. And there were rules on how to treat people based on all kinds of things, like how wealthy you were, what class of Jewish person you were, or even if you weren't Jewish. Women and children were to be treated as lesser people with only certain roles to play. Can you hold on to that? Don't let it fall. There you go. If you had certain deformities or diseases, you were said to be unclean, and you were sent out into the streets or into the wilderness to live alone or separate. So when Jesus began teaching, he saw how all of these rules were made to separate people, to oppress people, to treat people poorly, and simply to treat them without dignity and respect and worth. So he knew that to be closer to God, our task was to treat each other with love and kindness and compassion and forgiveness, even when it's hard to do so, because he knew that none of us are perfect, including himself. With his actions, he started taking down the rules. Liberating those that he helped and those that followed him to come into the light of love. So that his teachings allowed those boxes of oppression to be gone. So we don't exactly know what happened to Jesus when he died, but we do know that those that followed him, after grieving for his loss, were suddenly extremely happy and looking forward to a life that they would lead that would be worthy of him and his teachings. So for you youths, Easter represents a resurrection of his spiritual teachings and the good that can come from some of our darkest days. Thank you, Nor, for helping with our story. So today, let us pray as you are able, and we're going to sing our opening hymn, number 61, Lo, the Earth Awakes Again. After the song, before our words of centering, any younger youths who are interested in having an Easter party need to meet me out back and over into the classroom. Thank you.
be seated. It is my pleasure to welcome Nina Tritelli as my co-reader for our Centering in Words. We move now into our time of centering, an opportunity for us to bring ourselves fully present and prepare ourselves to explore an idea together on this Easter Sunday. Easter calls us, as religious liberals, to utilize a certain inquisitive imagination. Suppose we approach the Easter story with curiosity and creativity. In that case, we might encounter parallels with our own time as we deal with both continued despair and anger over the world and our own country, and a persistent yearning for life again, despite the struggles of viruses, economic uncertainty, and yet still a resolute hope for reclaiming for ourselves and those we love more life. So may Victoria Weinstein's words invite us with imagination and challenge into our time together. The stone has got to be rolled back from the tomb again and again every year. Roll up your sleeves.
He's not coming back, you know. He is not coming back unless it is we who rise for him, we who lay healing hands on the reviled and the rejected, like he did on his behalf. We who rage for righteousness in his insistent voice. We who love the sinner, even knowing that the sinner is no further off than our own heartbeat.
He will not be joining us at the table to share God's extravagant banquet, God's love feast. All are invited. Come as you are. And so it is you and I who must feast for him, must say the grace and break the bread and pass it to the left, and dish up the broiled fish or pour the wine and pass it to the right, and treat each other so tenderly as though just this morning she or he made the personal effort to make it back from heaven or from hell, but certainly from death to be by our side.
Because if by some miracle, and why not a miracle, he did come back, wouldn't he want to see us like this? Wouldn't it be a miracle to live for just one day, so that if he did, by some amazing feat, come riding into town, he would take a look around and say, this is what I meant.
And we could say it took us a long time, but we finally figured it out. Oh, let us live to make it so. You are the resurrection and the life. Will you join us for a time of quiet together? as we move into our time of offertory, may we each think about what it is that we have to offer to the world, especially in this time where there is so much that needs to be done. Part of what the offertory is always about is thinking about how we want to live our lives and hopefully steep them more and more in our values. May that value-based and generous understanding inspire a giving as the offering is now given and received. Bravo, Don. Thank you. As a young man in his 30s, he was finding conflict not only with the religious authorities of his time, but with the very people he was trying to help. Neither faction seemed to appreciate his leadership style, and there was a significant and nagging inner struggle about what he should be doing with his life, what direction his ministry should take. With so many significant factions and competing voices, he needed some time. So he decided what he must do was enter into a period of deep soul searching and extended spiritual practice. At the end of that time, his life changed dramatically. Well, I could be on this Easter talking about Jesus, of course, and in part his time of reflection and temptation for 40 days in the wilderness. However, I am actually referring to Jorge Mario Bergoglio, a young parish priest who was getting a bad rap with his peers for being too wishy-washy and his congregants for being too autocratic. And rather than dismissing his critics, he delved into the possible truths of his detractors. He explored his own leadership style and carefully studied the life of Jesus. He found particular power in the interpretation of Jesus' life offered by liberation theology. Within the stories around Jesus, there are so many deeper meanings of these narratives and within them, and we can experience that narrative in various ways to speak in our own lives. It has been the experience of many people in many different times and places to hear the stories of Jesus and conclude that Jesus came to us as a liberator. Mary, the mother of Jesus, responded to the Annunciation where she knew she would give birth by claiming that one day her soon-to-be son would be the one who would scatter the proud in the imagination of their hearts. He has put down the mighty from their seats and exalted those of low degree. He has filled the hungry with good things, and the rich he has sent away. This according to the Gospel of Luke. And Jesus himself in his initial sermon declared that he had come to bring good news to the poor and preach delivery to the captives. The social implications of these biblical themes of liberation have been taken up by a variety of groups over the past 50 years, including feminists, the LGBT community, the poor, and people of color. Often it is understood under the rubric of liberation theology. And I've talked to you about that before. And it never really went away, but it has reinvented itself in a myriad of ways. And people all over the world who struggle and have found components of Jesus' teachings and the work of the communities of faith liberating. It did, however, begin to fade from the vocabulary of typical church discourse, and certainly almost was never mentioned for several years within Unitarian Universalist circles. But Jorge Murillo Bergoglio transformed his understanding of his world and his ministry, and of course, on March 13th, 2013, became the 266th Pope, who would be known from that day forward as Francis. And on September of 2013, Pope Francis met with Gustavo Gutierrez, who is understood as the father of liberation theology. And his meeting signaled a rebirth of the power of that theological strand and the strong association of Jesus' life with the lives of the oppressed, which had fallen out of fashion in many Orthodox Christian movements. It needed to be rethought and re-examined. Gutierrez believed that the love of neighbor is an essential component of the religious life. But he wrote, "As long as I apply that term only to the people who cross my path and come asking me for help, my world remains pretty much the same. Individual almsgiving is a type of love that never leaves the front porch. On the other hand, my world will change greatly if I go out and meet other people on their path and consider them as my neighbor." He concludes, the gospel tells us that the poor are the supreme embodiment of our neighbor. So, today on Easter, one of the reasons I want to talk about this and why I want to explore with you why it matters to Unitarian Universalism has many layers. First, before we even get to today, to Easter, the thing is that liberation theology was very important in the ongoing growth of Unitarian Universalists theologically. We were deeply changed before liberation theology by the social gospel, which began to make it very clear that one of the primary ways that people live out their values is what happens in the world and how they engage it, which I know to us sounds like a major duh statement, but in many ways there was some division from really grappling with the big problems of the world and working with people that might not naturally be a part of your daily life as an essential component of what it means to be faithful. That was very, very powerful to our tradition because we believed from a perspective of gratitude that we needed to make a difference in the world. And as time continued, liberation theology allowed us to continue to expand our understanding of what it meant to look at Jesus as an outstanding part of our life. The original Unitarians and Universalists were certainly Christians, but over the years we began to expand beyond that, and so the relevance of Jesus seemed more and more in question. Liberation theology reminded us that there are thousands of people throughout the world that understand Jesus as the liberator. And all of us might find some power and meaning in that sense of liberation. But part of what is also true is that it means something powerful for our understanding of our theology. Many of the folks in our congregations who understand themselves as Christians often mean that they are what is often termed ethical Christians. Now, that is not juxtaposed to unethical Christians. It is more about that there are folks who understand that the way Jesus lived his life, his particular way of inviting in folks that might not have been considered at the core of the societal structures, and preaching about the importance of the holy, really paying attention to the least of people around you, and the way that religion and society treats those people being a major litmus test of its own moral fiber. Those components were essential to Jesus' teachings, and for many people also essential to this day to the way they live their lives. And many of them in our congregations and elsewhere deem themselves ethical Christians, meaning that the primary reason they call themselves Christians is because of the way that Jesus lived his life and the way he taught. And because he is an exemplar, they find it meaningful. Whether that's true or not, it helped us understand yet another way of taking Christianity as one of our sources and giving it a newer sense of meaning. The thing about liberation theology that feels new is that for a long time we sort of talked the talk of believing how important it was to reach out to the poor. But liberation theology really absolutely used all of its energy in sort of liberation theology, is that it gives us yet a different way of understanding how people might see the resurrection. Very few people in this congregation, I could probably win a lot of money if I were a betting man, believe literally in the resurrection. We always struggle with why is that symbol meaningful to us? Well, for liberation theology, what the resurrection was about is that one of the exemplars that said that the people who are often lost in society, the poor, those who are disenfranchised, Jesus' work was all about liberating those lives. And even with his death, there wasn't a death of that liberating force. It rose again and again in his followers who refused to give up that message in that work. For many people throughout the world, that is the real underpinning of what liberation theology says about the resurrection. That love and justice did not die with one person. It lives on as long as we struggle together to change the world. And so I think that it speaks to us a new message about how to understand this time of year as a renewed call to what it means to live in the world with a sense of deeper connection to our values, with a sense of paying attention to everyone that matters around us.
Another component that is new in my thinking about all this, the last part I will talk with you about this morning, actually came
at the beginning of the month when I was at the
Howard Thurman seminar. And one of the
two speakers, the Reverend Dr. Luther Smith, talked about how in African American theology, liberation was essential, and it was certainly essential to Howard Thurman. That freedom, that ability to overcome oppression, whether it was in our own personal lives or in societal oppression. But he also brought up that another essential component of all this is reconciliation. The idea that we are also working for a sense of healing, of helping people return to right relationship with each other and with this planet and with their own deeper selves. That it is about healing and, when possible, forgiveness. And I realize that I don't actually feel those two as fully juxtaposed. Because if we are liberating ourselves or each other, there is a sense of calling people to what they were meant to be in the first place, their full human selves. Oppression is about saying that some part of who you are, whether it's your own inner thoughts or the outer societal pressures, saying that it is not worthy, it is not valued. And yet, we believe And we believe for hundreds of years that every human being is worthy and should be valued. All components of them, even the complex parts of them, and we all have complex parts. So liberation is about returning to that truer state for each of us. Now, it isn't always possible in terms of our relationships with each other. There are some relationships that are so broken that we can't return to them in the way they were before. But even then, what we seek to do is to reclaim our wholeness, even in relationships that are deeply abusive, and we know that we must keep our distance from them. We need to find that place where we can let go of the toxicity that we have carried for so long. So on this Easter, may we think about both components for our lives in our work together. In liberation, how are we called in new ways to understand who, both within our walls and in the larger community, whose voice is not being heard, that has something essential to say? How are we called to be partners in the work against oppression? We've already begun that work, but there is always more to do. But also, the other part of that is, how are we being agents of reconciliation? How in our own lives are we fostering forgiveness? How are we returning to the deeper parts of who we are and being in right relationship with that component of our humanity? Both of them carry us into deeper lives. Both of them help us understand ourselves, especially in this time. Let me conclude with a poem that I think does a good job of thinking a little bit about the intensity and rockiness of that ongoing process of really taking seriously who we are in the world, especially in times of upheaval. It's entitled Fault Line by Robert Walsh. Did you ever think there might be a fault line passing underneath your living room? A place in which life is lived in meeting and in separating, wondering and telling, unaware that just beneath you is an unseen great plate that strains through time, and that your life, already spilling over the brim, could be invaded, sent off in a due direction, turned aside by forces you were warned about but not prepared for. Shells could be spilled out, the level floor set in an angle, in some seconds shaking. You would have to take your losses, do whatever must be done next. When the great plates slip and the earth shivers and the flaw is seen to lie in what you trusted most, look not to more solidity, to weighty slabs of concrete poured, or strength of cantilevered beams to save the fractured order. Trust more the tensile strands of love that bend and stretch to hold you in the web of life that's often torn, but always healing. There is your strength. The shifting plates, the restive earth, your room, your precious life, they all proceed from love, the ground on which we walk together. As we move into this very strange and ever-changing time, both in our own worlds and the greater world, what would it mean, rather than building more solidity, to let the fragile power of love, the enduring power of love, lead us forward? I believe this year that is a powerful question for Easter and for the weeks ahead. May it be so. I invite you to stand in all the ways that we do and join us in an example of that social gospel envisioning of Jesus, O Young and Fearless Prophet, number 276. And now as we prepare to leave this place, may we recall all the great old stories that we are asked to engage again and again with new imagination. Though we extinguish this chalice, we do not extinguish the light of how wisdom may still speak in each of us. We do not extinguish the power of the call to act for love and justice. We do not extinguish the warmth of human community and love. Those things will remain in your life until you gather in this place again. Look forward to seeing you out in coffee hour, and remember, next week begins candidating week. Blessings as you move into that powerful week. See you in a few minutes.